Okay, sorry, I'm here. Right, for those on Facebook, we're talking about our Star Hope that's on her Washington DC trip, and hoping she's had a good time on that. All right, we might have a shorter lesson this morning, possibly, but so you all chime in anytime you want to, if you have anything to say. I wanted to ask you all something. Would you all be interested in, as a group, I thought about doing like little index cards for us to start learning some verses out of the Bible. I need to bring something out, got the mail. I don't know if y'all get them, it's these little mailers, and they're about 3 or 4 pages, and they're from the Church of Christ. And they have some really good information in them, and I don't know how often I get them. It seems like I'll get one, and in a little while I get another one. But one of them was talking about the Bible, that we need to store some of it in our heart, because that in our heart, nobody can take that away from us. No matter what happens, or even, if you're laying in the hospital bed or whatever, and there's just stuff that you've stored that can't be taken away, or that you have for comfort or whatever. But I thought, I didn't know if anybody would be like, well, I can't remember anything. Nobody can remember less than me. I know. Dale used to tell me, playing the piano, he said, now, you have to memorize it, but you can't do it unless you memorize it. It's like, Dale, I was a little bit older than you when I started. I can't memorize anything, and I've got 3 songs I'm working on now, and I've probably played them 50 times each practicing. I don't know them. I will not memorize them when I play them 50 more times. It just don't happen. I have to look and see it. So, but this is something I think. If I put my little card up in my bathroom mirror or something, then I'll look at it over and over. Surely I'm going to remember something from it, or fight the memory loss too. That's one thing I think some things, if you don't use it, you lose it. So I need to use mine a whole.
It's funny though, the scripture will always come back to you.
Yeah. I don't know about you all, but I can remember, I didn't get to go to Bible school a lot when I was a child, but I remember a chapter that we learned in Bible school back probably 12 years old or something. But like you say, it's something that it seems like that you can grasp and remember more than just trivial, all that football and baseball stuff that men know. Back in 1972, so-and-so won the World Series. So don't see how that happens. But this morning we're on page 44 in our lesson. God's people living in humility is the name of this chapter. And what is humility? What would you all say? How would you describe humility?
Not thinking more highly of yourself.
Humble, be kind to people, loving people. Always, the verse I always remember is to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But now don't ask me what chapter or Bible chapter it's in or whatever. I just remember the verse. I can't remember where it's at.
But that is true for humility. If you want to be humble, you're not going to want somebody to
hurt somebody else.
Yeah, that's true. Neil, you sounded like you were about to say something. No.
Come on, Neil.
You're waking up.
Okay, I didn't know if you had our golden text that said, yea, all of you be subject one to another and be clothed with humility, for God resisteth the proud and giveth grace to the humble. So as far as our relationship to God, we see right there that he resisteth the proud. So he's not going to show any favors to your pride. It's not what he's looking for in us. And our introduction says, God's command to be humble is to all believers, both those holding sacred office and those members of the laity. So is to be humble to all believers, both those holding sacred office. So that means Buford, as our preacher, is to be as humble as we are, as being his, the flock of the Lord. That all of us should show humility. It says all men should strive to be examples of humility, patterning their lives after the greatest example, Jesus Christ. And I guess, he did many things in the Bible to show humility, but if you think of Jesus showing his humility, what's the first thing that pops in your head?
I mean, his kindness, here to fight back.
Right. Well, when he could have struck them all dead. Yes. Yeah, when they tried to make the children leave him alone. And what act do y'all remember of his, of something that was very low that he did for his disciples that showed him washing feet, and I read, where they walked and where they were dusty and dirty, that was just a real humbling act that the master would sit down and wash their feet and not have any, I can remember, I don't know why this, but Sheila, being my sister, she had a little stubborn streak in her. Little probably wasn't the word. But I remember she talking about when she was little, for some reason my mother wanted her to milk and she wouldn't do it. And my mom was not one that, she would whip us, but, not continually. But my sister said, I forget how many whippings she got in a row, but she would not milk a cow. So, that's how our pride gets. We can get beat and beat and beat, but we just grit our teeth and, we're not going to humble ourselves. It's like we'll get something on our mind and not do it. And, not in a form of weakness that I can't do it, but it's something, that you just know that maybe you can't do, but you just get this streak about you that you're not going to admit that you're wrong, maybe. Yeah. You just don't want to be.
And Grandpa used to try to make us, and I tried, but I couldn't get it done. He walked on and he said, try again. He said, get up. Finally, he'd get angry. At least no patience.
At least you tried.
I just,
Oh, I thought maybe a Dennis story was coming on, but Jen will have to think on it for a minute. He wasn't.
Well, he was stubborn, but I can't think of it.
Any story right now? Okay, in the teacher's book, the lesson aid on the degree you all, it says, depend upon it, we shall be humble enough if we know ourselves, but we shall only know ourselves as we know Jesus. In his greatness, we discover our littleness. In his goodness, our sin. In his love, our coldness. In his life, our example. So, to gain or attain any of those things, it's saying first we have to know Jesus. And then these things line up behind him once we see ourselves in his example that he set. And, we've talked a whole lot in terms of kids, how important an example is, how much more important an example is even than words that we can say. Because if we're doing something, but saying something else, we really ruin, it's not going to make a difference when we do that.
It's like that. You stood up and if you think about it, he was so humble, and if he was in the crowd or something like that, he didn't have like a bunch of gold on or something like that. In the Bible, they'll say that he, had a lot of riches and stuff like that. Somewhere, like a king would stand out because they had, the finest clothes, riches on them, gold, some silver, something like that. The way you had to see him is from his actions.
And he, he is our example, and he could have come to us as a king like they expected. Like Neil said, they didn't expect him to come in the humble way he did. They were expecting, a mighty king to rise up and destroy the Roman Empire, and that's what they had in their mind, is that, they were looking for Jesus, but they weren't looking for the Jesus that came.
They were looking for the elegance, I guess you could say,
Yes.
Something that pop out,
Yeah, and he did.
Pretty much he could walk right over their nose and they didn't even know.
So that's a good point.
He's the same person with the ones that didn't have nothing as he was with the ones that did, that accepted him.
Right. And sometimes, if you look back, the religious people at the time, the Pharisees and the ones that were really proud and puffed up, remember, he didn't have many good words for them.
But he went into, where they was using in his markets, gammon and stuff, he turned over the tables.
Yeah.
They didn't get angry.
Yeah, and that's what people, and he, he is loved, but he, there's a right and a wrong, that yes, he's just, that's the word, thank you, is, that he does love.
And he says, be angry and sin not. So you can be angry about things that are going on. Maybe not personal, but like the world or whatever, angry at how bad people are living in general, but you don't have to sin.
Right.
Somebody I think of that was really humble in this day and age was Michelle. She was the most humblest person. And
Yeah, she's.
so you can't be that way if you try.
Yeah, and she is a good example because, and I think we talked about this before, sometimes if somebody would get mad on Facebook or say stuff, Michelle would correct it. She would put a post on there that wasn't mean or spiteful toward anybody, but it got the message across that, that this is the way we must act as a Christian. And I don't know if I told you all, but after her mom and dad came here, her mom sent me a friend request. And I really enjoyed it because she posts the post that Michelle posted. So it's good to see that the goodness, because Facebook can be a bad, ugly place. And I dislike it for the most part. Yeah, it is. But then there's people like them that post stuff that's really good and really enlightening and doesn't make you angry and want to sin, like Janet says. It calls stuff, stuff that's said or put out there that can really enrage you, but you can do stuff that builds up and not to do that. So, that's something that we especially to make your Christian witness seem,
Everybody.
yeah.
She was a very loving person.
But we need to take a stand as a Christian.
Yeah, we have to.
On things that are wrong and whatever, but I think there's a right way and a wrong way.
Yeah, and it's better, even with your husband. When you get that anger, like you say, or something rises up, kind of calm down a minute before you say, because that's when, like Janet said, that's when it's hard to not sin when you do something. When you lash right back out in an angry moment, it's not going to be good. Right, Eddie?
What do you say, Ed said? I'm glad Jane's not here. He'd be poking my ribs out.
Well, we have a lot of discussions. They might get a little stronger sometimes, but in the end, we calm down.
Yeah.
You've never said
Eddie.
yes, ma'am, in your life.
Eddie always gets the last word in.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Just like that.
Just wait, we're gonna have to get that shirt, just leave it here at church.
Made in front of his
I
seat,
have to take her for a long ride.
or she goes home, take her out to eat, and you'll be in trouble.
Yeah, Eddie's gonna have to backpedal now real bit.
Well, you can have your discussions, and they get a little heated, but you don't have to say mean things back to them. And, you know, then say a prayer. You can say a prayer together to help you calm down.
And you don't necessarily agree with it, or you don't agree with everybody, and anybody.
Nobody does.
Yeah, but like you said, there's a right way, and if it gets too bad, separate, and there's some things that you know, don't bring up. Don't discuss these things. or
You gotta get this lesson done before Jean gets here.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to go back there and get her.
Okay.
Hope me there.
Hope Jean's not listening and taking notes for
No,
what
you'll
you
be getting me.
said.
I'm listening, I'm listening.
So we are in 1 Peter chapter 5. We'll read the first few verses. It says, "The elders which are among you I exhort, who am also an elder and a witness of the suffering of Christ, and also a partaker of the glory that shall be revealed. Feed the flock of God which is among you, taking the oversight thereof, not by constraint, but willingly, not for filthy lucre, but of a ready mind. Neither as being lords over God's heritage, but being examples to the flock. And when the chief shepherd shall appear, ye shall receive a crown of glory that fadeth not away." So, it says, "The elders which are among ye, I'll exhort who elder." And the lesson writer says that he may not necessarily be talking about older people, although they said, a lot of the congregation probably would have been older. But he was talking about particularly the leaders in the church, as he was talking about elders. He says he was a witness, Peter was a witness of the sufferings of Christ, having observed his agony in the garden, been with him when he was apprehended, and followed him to the hall of the high priest, and likely he was a spectator at the cross. So Peter, unlike Paul, who had written a lot of the New Testament, Peter had been with Jesus, had been with him through his ministry, and had seen, the sufferings that Jesus went through, and he saw the humility that he was able to hold on to, even through all this that he did willingly for us.
In another thing, you edit out all of that, and it takes a mighty man to.
Yeah.
Know what they're gonna do.
If you think about it, think if we knew our dad, how hard that is. I mean, I think that's a,
You need the
yes. And like you say, the agony of kids just wasn't normal.
whenever, even when one of the disciples would have cut off one of the soldier's ears, he did it right back.
Yeah.
So,
When in your heart, when that was happening, if you had that ability,
but he didn't have no fight,
no. And even after, he said to forgive them, for they know not what they do. So, yeah, he carried that humility when it really hard.
And, even he asked God, he said, let's take this cup away, but not my will, but your will.
Yeah.
So, he was willing to make his father.
And it talks about, it's sweat and drops. So, I mean, if you think, well, he was God in this real, he was a human, right? At that time, he was God, but he felt his human body, and he felt the agony of going through that. And like you said, he asked to be taken away from that, but
He actually came here for us, and but he lived
he's our intercessor between us and the Lord, because he put on the human body to know what it feels like when we cry out, when we pray because we're in pain. He knows what pain is. It's hard. You know, you talk about people that tell people about raising kids or whatever, and they don't have one, or a drug problem, and that, you know, once you have the experience in it, you're a lot closer to knowing the feelings and stuff.
And when it's on problem, when I'm, or something, well, if you say you're on safe yourself, and that's it. But I mean, he was there for us.
Yeah.
And he was with us. But the Bible says you can call 10,000.
But he had it, and even in the pain and the fear and the agony, he didn't lose.
And then, you know, that one said, remember me. You will be with me in paradise.
Yeah, you see the difference in the people. The one said, remember me, and the other one was mocking, just like the rest of the crowd was. And that's a good place of that. That's our choice in life, whether to do. And that was those two men's choice. And you saw that not everybody makes the right choice. Yeah. That's a good problem. It says, feed the flock of God which is among you, taking the oversight thereof, not by constraint, but willingly, not for filthy lucre, but of a ready mind. So, you know, he's telling the leaders of the church not to be a pastor of this church is your job. I'm going to go do this, and I want to get paid a lot of money to do it, and I'm a good showman, and I can get up on this stage, and I've got this charisma that people will listen to me and pay me a lot of money. You know, that's not what he wants out of his leaders. He wants people to do it from their heart, that they show this. I remember years ago, my mother worked at maybe Transylvania, maybe wrong. It was at a Bible college at one time. But she said that the students there were going to be preachers, and that it was really obvious the ones that were called by the Lord and the ones that were doing it just simply as a vocation. That it was not hard to tell.
I think if you're a preacher, you need to follow the Bible. I mean, don't get into the people. You can't do that. I mean, example is, well, you know, even today, a lot of them are accepting homosexuals in the church, marrying them in the church.
Getting out of God's word.
Yeah. Well, it's, I think you want to be popular and keep the money coming in rather than take the loss of attendance.
If you do that, they die lost.
You've not done anything. And it's not a hatred toward.
I think the Lord will hold you responsible for those souls.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did I tell them what's what?
Yeah, I think, if you start veering away from the Bible for any reason, and the Bible says stuff that cuts all of us. It's not certain people, and it's not, we were talking about last week when it was talking about, no, if you suffer as a murderer, as a thief, as evildoer, a busybody, there's things that we might try to pretend like, but it touches us all. And as the pastor, although, he knows maybe, well, generally, they don't know what you're doing, but you feel like they do when they sit in here and they're preaching at something that's all over you. You think, how do you know that's going on? But, part of the word is to cut and divide and to make us think of what we're doing and to do that. But, it's charging the preachers to not do it as a money-making thing that, you know, if you haven't been called to preach, don't decide you're gonna be a preacher, that's, you know, not what he's looking for. And I think eventually, surely, you're gonna not be able to stand up and wash out if you're not called. I mean, because it's hard enough. I accidentally found this lady, Dr. Anita Phillips, and she's a black lady that, I don't know if she preaches or what, or her husband, but she was giving a talk. And she was talking about that she was a pastor's child. And as a child, how she saw how the congregation treated her mother and father. And she said that she was very angry. As a little kid, she said she didn't know everything that was going on, but she just saw the fact that the pastor, people got mad because he did, and people got mad because he didn't. And he said, and the pastor's wife, she said that was even worse. Said that, you know, people, because nobody in church, everybody has different thoughts and stuff going on. And to be able to get along and do that, which she says, looking on it as a child, that it really skewed her thoughts, and she really became angry about the church and how what she saw, how they treated and stuff. So we got to be really careful of what we do and what we get mad and little fights. For instance, one thing I guess, because it was so petty that I always remember, my dad was going to a church, and they built $1 million building, and probably more than that. The congregation, you know, they were all happy. Then after the building was built, it seems like there's always seems, you know, they're in big debt now, and they're starting getting some really discord in the church, and people were really mad over little things. Well, he said there was one person that had really did a lot for the church. You know, they cleaned and they just willingly did anything that needed to be done. Well, that person borrowed the vacuum cleaner one time, and somebody else in the church threw a fit and got really mad, and that person, just little bitty stuff like that, and they had a real big blow up over it after it just kept get to be a big thing. But it was just it's like, and Janet said, I mean, you can agree to disagree or whatever that you can do, but you have to really watch, because there's so many different personalities, not to let those things flare up and get the best of a congregation, because you know, there are some things, and you find out with parenthood, there's some things that are big, and there's other things that, you know, you took the vacuum cleaner home, you brought it, you know, and it's somebody that worked hard in the church and they can't borrow the vacuum cleaner for a day. But
Like this one part, the true servant of God labors with a sincere desire to glorify God, a love for immortal souls, and a desire to see men saved.
said nothing about me or not about it.
No.
Yeah, that's an example. Let me see, verse 3 says, neither as being lords over God's heritage, but being examples to the flock. So a preacher is not a lord over the church. He's not to be the taskmaster, and he's to be the biggest example in the church for us. It says they are not to impose unscriptural human inventions instead of necessary duty, weighing down men with burdens grievous to be borne. And when I was reading that, I thought about in the Old Testament, the laws that Jesus gave them. Remember, the men turned it into, I'm thinking, like 600 laws that they weren't possibly able to keep. And that's what we tend to do if it's left up to us. We get all puffed up and start making rules. And if Gene's in a blue truck, he's here.
Oh, man.
So you better go on back.
Let me sit up straight. You know, when you married 50 years to one one person, sometimes you're gonna get on their toes. It seems like he says, you stay on my feet all the time.
Eddie, were you gonna say something?
That God, you don't like the crowd, you like someone.
Yeah.
The more hungry you are, the more
You're willing to listen when you're humble. And verse 4 says, and when the chief shepherd shall appear, chief shepherd meaning Jesus, you shall receive a crown of glory that fadeth not away. So that, by being humble and by giving to the flock right, you're going to receive a crown of glory for that. And, I don't know why, I just think that's a glorious thing to think of receiving crowns from the Lord.
You think it's what, how big a crown that is. I mean, not in size or anything, but you're gonna be up there with him. And
And
I
I'll
can't imagine, I mean,
imagine the Lord saying, well done, my good and faithful servant. That's what we want to hear, and that's what we want to work toward and remember. So, starting in verse 5, it says, likewise, ye younger, submit yourselves unto the elder. Yea, all of you be subject one to one another, and be clothed with humility. For God resisteth the proud, and giveth grace to the humble. Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time, casting all your care upon him, for he careth for you. So, as you all were saying, it says it right here, for God resisteth the proud and giveth grace to the humble. So as you become humble, you're building up treasures for yourself. Every time that you don't take this proud stance, that you give reverence to those that it's due, that you're building up. It says, humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God. Let me see. It says, he deems to be best and most proper for his circumstances, raise him above his trials, either by the removal of the trouble or in taking the same to be with themselves. So, the trials that we come, he's going to take care of it one way or the other. We have to depend on him, not ourselves. And sometimes, like we were saying, in anger or whatever, that we take this prideful stand on things. Start of verse 8, it says, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour, whom resist steadfast in the faith, knowing that the same afflictions are accomplished in your brethren that are in the world. But in the God of all grace, who hath called us unto his eternal glory by Jesus Christ, after that ye have suffered a while, make ye perfect, establish, strengthen, and settle you. To him be glory and dominion forever and ever. Okay, verse 8 says, talks about this is something we've heard over and over, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about seeking whom he may devour. And the lesson writer had talked, I don't know if it was in you all or in the teachers, that this scripture to the people it was written back then really did something. Because they were going through tortures, and the Romans had the arenas, and they were putting people in to be eaten and torn apart. So when he compares Satan against the roaring lion walking about whom he may devour, that this is a real close image in their mind, as it is even for us now that haven't seen anything like that. But it is his desire to have us. He even told Peter that the devil wishes to have you, and he wants to sift you like wheat. It's like, and we've heard Patty talk about no matter who or where you think you are, he wants you and he wants to grind you up. And he's gonna try in every little, weak spot he can find. If you wake up in the morning and you don't feel good, or if you wake up in the morning and Jean didn't get your coffee finished, or it's too strong, he just waiting to get you riled up for it. In the teacher's guide I have marked this, it said, our adversary is strong as a roaring lion, but the lion of the tribe of Judah, who is that? Is stronger than him. So, we do have a strong adversary against us, but we have a stronger one for us.
Sometimes it feels like a roaring lion too.
But
I mean, he's always there. But God is always knows what he's gonna do and knows what he's gonna do to us. And all we gotta do is, Lord help me, let me get through this. Devil ain't gonna beat him.
no,
He never has and never will.
no. And sometimes the speaker I was telling you about the other day, she was talking about, asking the Lord, but being willing to wait for the answer. She was talking about people, she said, I met this man and I wanted to marry him. And, and I asked the Lord, he was like, this is not the man. And she said, I cried, I was mad, I was upset. And she said, her husband was sitting on the front row and she pegged him, but she said, but thank you, Lord, for not, and for not, allowing me to give in and do that. So sometimes we don't get the answer we want, or we don't hear the minute we want it, but it doesn't mean that we're not heard. That, things will, if we will leave it alone, will work out
For our best.
for us. Looks like we have a few minutes. If y'all want to answer a couple questions. First question says, who are the elders? So who should we see as the elders in the church? Other than obviously, the elders, as in age-wise, are due respect. But who else is this lesson was considering as elders?
Anyone that's trying to serve a Christian life
Well,
should be respected.
Any leadership role, if pastors or board members, deacons, or any leadership.
The ones that are appointed to feed us,
Yes.
give us his word and lead us. Like you.
And he was talking about the verse here that said, feed my flock. Remember when Jesus told people, feed my flock, he told them three, feed my flock, as he did it. It says, how does a true shepherd feed his flock? Yes. He doesn't telling stories about his life or all the time, or how to do stuff, or how he sees fit to do stuff. As Neil said, he teaches him from the gospel, and he doesn't veer off of it and make it what he wants it to be. Okay, what promises were made to the humble? We saw it.
Give that crown someday.
The crown, it called it the crown of righteousness, the crown of life. So that this is something that,
You get to see him.
yes.
Full respect.
And, all that time sometimes, because it's easy to let it get away. And you can't take it back. Sometimes when you're really mad, you lash out and say something hurtful that maybe you're not going to mean an hour from now, but right then you don't realize that. Why is the devil pictured as a roaring lion?
He is.
Yes,
Drag us under.
he doesn't want good.
He's waiting for your first wrong move, that way you can sleep in.
Yeah.
You're like a lion that sneaks up on you,
He
you make it.
keeps them in, keep out, and he's gonna take it in with him.
Yeah, he's,
Gonna jump on you.
and imagine, I mean, he does that, it is little Neil's walking around not knowing what's going on, and, you know, or maybe, you know, something's happened, that you have a choice between right and wrong, a thing to do, and like you said, like a lion, he's sitting there, and if you watch cats hunt and stuff, they're pretty vicious.
Sit in the pants.
Yeah.
And the patient too, that's the thing.
Yeah.
He wants your soul, that's what he wants.
Yes,
He catches like a nice cat, and puts his mouth or something. I've seen him put them between their legs, and then take off running, they take a ball, and bring them back.
yeah, and I mean, he kind of does that as far as you run and you do this for a while, and you, yeah, it is, and you know, like he says, he's tortured, and it's an eternal game for him. He has been defeated, and as you all said, he wants to take, yeah,
And he can use worldly possessions to make,
yes, yeah,
make a wrong move.
Yeah. Yeah.
He don't want you to live a Christian life because he wants your soul.
And if you're not living for God now, you know, he's not worried about you, but you know, he got you.
and he's subtle, you know, I mean, I guess I think of people that we had talked about earlier, if you don't follow the word, you can get off course, so that maybe you don't really know it, you're not doing really blatantly bad things, but that, you know, he's just slowly dragging you off course, because, you know, it is an end eternal game for him. He wants as many dragged down with him, and you know, it says that narrow is the gate, broad is the one that leads to destruction. That, you know, so he is feeding on many people.
He loves misery and torture and stuff, and the more people he gets, the more he can stand down there and listen to the screams.
Misery loves company is what my mother.
Well, you know, you take alcohol and drugs, you just about turn him.
Yeah.
You can't very few people, I think, can get off of that.
I've heard Buford, and I heard somebody the other day talking about how these things eventually totally change your brain chemistry even. So you think if your brain has been changed, then your whole thought process isn't right anymore. So like Eddie says, without supernatural help, how do you reverse that? You know, if you have a brain chemistry change. Do these two together. Says, how can we resist Satan effectively? How can you resist him? And it says, what does God hope to accomplish in allowing the suffering in our lives? What does that do? But first, how can we resist?
We need to be vigilant in the word, you know, read the Bible. And, you know, you can't jump to every little thing that comes along. Just because it comes along in the name of religion does not mean it's what the Lord is pushing, you know? So you've got to try the spirits, as it says in the Bible, and that's a way of being vigilant with the Lord.
And these trials will make you strong.
You know, I heard something the other day, and I guess it really gets me. Because I love praise and worship music. I do. I really love it. But it was talking about that you need to stay in the Word first and foremost. That you're not going to get what you need from the praise and worship music by itself. Maybe the Word comes first. You know, nothing that you know you can listen, but you need to be very rooted in the Word.
big thing I see is God doesn't change. Thank today. Yesterday, small. Doesn't change at all. Whatever's in that Bible, you can allow.
And then try to change things as we evolve, you know, what it looks like. I think. All right, well, thank you all, and, Jean, you might want to watch the first.